It's no secret that NASCAR's popularity has fallen significantly since its highest point in the mid-2000s. Ideas on how to rectify this problem span the gamut between the sensible and the absurd, making it more about entertainment than about sporting, holding street races in the middle of major cities, doubling down on our core audience in the South. If you can think of it, then somebody has thrown it out there, and chances are NASCAR has probably tried it already. But without fail, if you ask fans about what should be done, one suggestion that always comes up, no matter what race, creed, color, age, or any other demographic fans fall into, is that we need more short tracks. It is literally the one thing NASCAR fans can all agree on. We just won't shut up about it. And practically speaking, it actually makes a lot of sense. A short track is technically any oval track that is less than a mile in length. So that means that startup costs are relatively low, and the smaller space needed means that less money is required to pay for upkeep and property taxes. As far as the racing product is concerned, short tracks almost always put on a good show. Why? Well, for one very simple reason. Less space means more contact, and NASCAR is and always has been one of the few motorsports where intentional and unintentional contact is not just tolerated, but encouraged. Fans love a slugfest of a race, and even if there isn't a whole lot of beating and banging, the close quarters mean that no one driver can get too far away from anyone else, so there's always something going on. And just because a track is shorter doesn't mean it can't hold a lot of people. At one point, Bristol Motor Speedway topped out at a max capacity of 168,000 people. And even what we consider to be smaller venues could cram 60,000 fans within their confines, more than enough to make a tidy profit on race week. However, there is one glaring problem with this seemingly easy fix. Attendance is down at these tracks. The NASCAR Cup Series currently only runs at 3 short tracks: Bristol, Martinsville, and Richmond, 2 times apiece per season. Bristol looks like a straight-up ghost town for its spring race. Martinsville has downsized considerably and still has patches of bare metal grandstands out there, and Richmond has torn down half of its seats in the last decade and can't even come close to filling the seats that remain. People say they want short track racing, but then they never seem to show up for it. It's just a case of people not putting their money where their mouth is. But it's not really the people's fault. Take a look at this. Here's a map of every track on the NASCAR Cup Series schedule for 2022. Pretty diverse group here. But then here are where all the short tracks are. See that? All 3 of our short tracks are competing for the same group of people in the Tennessee-Virginia area. Of course no one shows up for these races. We're asking the same group of people to go to 6 races per year. That shit's expensive even if you're local and don't have to camp out or get a hotel. Making matters worse is that for their spring races, Bristol, Martinsville, and Richmond hold their races back to back to back 3 weeks in a row. Forget the cost for a minute, that's just exhausting to think about going to 3 races in 3 weeks. I actually did that last year, and by the time the 3rd weekend started, I was already feeling burned out and was just ready for it to be over with. So why are the 3 remaining short tracks so close together? Why didn't NASCAR or anyone else build new race-ready big league short tracks anywhere besides this area? Well, NASCAR and SMI built a lot of new top-of-the-line tracks in the 90s and early 2000s. They built them all over the place too. Las Vegas, Texas, Kentucky, California, Kansas, Chicago, you name it. You can't say they didn't put their eggs in a lot of different baskets. But all of these tracks were huge 1.5 or 2 mile circuits. Track builders saw the rabid turnout at big tracks like Charlotte, Atlanta, and Michigan and said, hey, we're getting 6-figure numbers of people to show up to those places, and we're making bank on infield camping, so let's just keep doing that. There was also a push to make NASCAR seem more civilized during this time too. Teams and sponsors didn't want beating and banging hot-headed rednecks out there. They wanted talented athletes making clean passes with skill rather than muscle. But racing at these new tracks was mediocre at best most of the time, or just an outright snooze fest. Cars were getting too far apart for any action to occur, and as the cars became more aerodynamically dependent thanks to new technological advances, it only made the problem worse. During this time, no new short tracks were built, as they were seen as relics from the past, and everyone wanted the big new shiny super speedways that were some of the largest sporting venues ever built in human history to draw in more interest. As a matter of fact, the last time a brand new short track was added to the Cup Series schedule was in 1970, when the Albany-Saratoga Speedway hosted 2 races, one apiece in 1970 and 1971. I'm 32 now. My parents were in elementary school when that happened. Since then, we've just been chipping away at our remaining short tracks. From 1972 to 1984, there were 5 short tracks on the schedule. The 3 we talked about earlier, Bristol, Martinsville, and Richmond, in addition to North Wilkesboro and the Nashville Fairgrounds. Want to know where those tracks are located? Well, shit, right where all the other ones are. Making matters worse is the only 2 prospects for new short tracks being added to the Cup Series schedule are Nashville and North Wilkesboro. which have just been greenlit for big renovations. Those aren't going to solve our problem though, and will just lead to spreading our existing fan base even thinner. But hold on, we had these 5 tracks crammed together for decades with people still showing up and packing out stands. What happened? Why is it so hard to get these people now? Well, 2 things. First was NASCAR grew in the 90s and so did the ticket prices. NASCAR was the biggest craze in the country, so it was easy to just jack up ticket and campground prices to push revenue even higher. For some perspective, my grandparents used to rent a campground site at the Charlotte Motor Speedway right near where the dirt track is today for the All-Star Race weekend. The cost to get that exact spot for the entire weekend with electric and water hookups was just $100. That was it. The tickets to the race to sit on the front stretch at pit entrance were $45 a piece. Pole night tickets were $10, and you got to watch an IROC race right afterwards. As a 6-year-old kid, I bought my own ticket to watch Mark Martin win an IROC race in 1996. Today, forget about it. Even the cheap seats down in the splash zone will run you $65 at most places, and to sit up higher like I was back in the day could easily run $110. Even when adjusted for inflation, those prices are high. NASCAR has always relied on a thriving middle class to show up to races, and for most, the cost of going to 2 or 3 races a year was doable. But nowadays, it's just too tall of an order. And that gets us to our second point. The middle class in America has been absolutely decimated in recent years. In the 90s, manufacturing jobs started to dry up. I was in middle school when the last textile mill shut down in my hometown of Greenville, South Carolina in the early 2000s. These were pretty good paying middle class jobs, and you really only needed a high school diploma to get them. A few of these manufacturing jobs remained, but by and large, people switched to one of 2 things: service industry jobs that paid less, or they moved to the big cities where all the opportunities were. This meant that small town America got hit hard too. Once vibrant downtowns in middle America withered away into abandoned carcasses. In 1996, North Wilkesboro Speedway was dropped from the Cup Series schedule, and that hurt Wilkes County pretty badly. But the next 2 hits floored them. A Lowe's distribution center closed its doors, and a glass manufacturing plant moved overseas. Stories like this pop up in every state in the union, and eventually everyone felt the sting. This wasn't just NASCAR's problem. Attendance is down in every sport, from the MLB to the NFL. People just can't afford it anymore. Even restaurants like Ruby Tuesday, TGI Fridays, Hooters, and Applebee's have all been on the ropes because the middle class they once catered to just doesn't exist anymore. Turns out if you squeeze people hard enough, they stop spending their money on luxury items and focus on necessities. They stop going out to eat, they stop going on vacation, and they stop showing up to sporting events. When NASCAR and SMI built all those new tracks and big markets in the 90s, it was because they saw the writing on the wall. People are moving to where the opportunities are, and those are in the big cities. NASCAR wagered that those people would keep coming to races, but in time, NASCAR has proven to be wrong. NASCAR just doesn't appeal to the metropolitan. Its heart and soul is in the small towns with middle-class America. Nearly all of the drivers from the 90s and early 2000s came from humble beginnings, and that was always the draw. We like to watch common men do uncommon things. Go to your local short track today and take a look at the people there. None of them have PhDs, most of them went through high school and that was it. Probably a lot of them don't even own the building that they live in. Americans got squeezed a lot in the last few decades, and median wages barely kept up with inflation as the cost of living continued to rise. The rich got richer, the middle class shrank, and the poor got poorer. And before you start pointing fingers down in the comments, this was overseen by every president since the 80s on both sides of the aisle. This wasn't something that was started by one person or one group. This is something that has been perpetuated for decades. NASCAR's short track problem has its beginnings in bad foresight and a lack of diversity in venues, but its core problem is an economic problem. The average NASCAR fan just cannot afford to go to a race, let alone 3 races at short tracks that are all within spitting distance of one another. So how do we combat this? I don't know. I can spitball some ideas out there, but ultimately there is no silver bullet that can magically fix this problem, because it's way bigger than either me or NASCAR. Hailing back to the expansionist phase of the 90s, NASCAR has once again gone to where the people have migrated to and held the 2022 Busch Clash at a temporary short track constructed inside of the LA Coliseum. The race received some good turnout, and it looks to host the Clash again in 2023. So maybe stadium races are the path forward to solving the short track conundrum we find ourselves in. But some part of me thinks that temporary short tracks and football stadiums is just putting a band-aid over a cancerous tumor. It's not solving the problem, it's just nibbling around the edges. There is some talk about converting the 2-mile California Speedway into a half-mile short track, but it's just that, talk. Absolutely no arrangements have been made to do the full conversion, and so far only the idea has been floated out there. but converting some bigger tracks like Texas or Chicagoland into short tracks sounds more reasonable. But as of recording this, only North Wilkesboro and Nashville are even in the conversation. And as much as I want to see these legacy venues return to NASCAR competition, I worry that the people who would love to watch a race at these joints might just not be able to ever afford it. The big tracks and road courses that we have on the schedule now are far enough apart from one another that they have their own unique fan bases, but all of our short tracks are fighting each other for the same group of people that are being squeezed out of coming to races altogether. NASCAR could buy out an already existing short track in a new market like Colorado National or Kern County Speedway, and then renovate it for a top tier series race, but that comes with its own litany of problems. What about local weekly races? What if it doesn't get the return on investment you hoped and now you're just out tens of millions of dollars? We can't keep doing what we're doing, and we have no easy outs coming down the pipe. And that, in a nutshell, is NASCAR's short track problem. Sorry to end this on such a bleak note, but if you got a magic fix or a silver bullet handy, I'd really like to hear about it. Anyway, I'm Slapshoes. Thanks for watching, and until next time, y'all take it easy.